Brian Barrett, County Juvenile Department.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So let me do this. I think I can see some names. So I'm gonna call your name, and then you will say if you're here or you're pretending to be here, or there's somebody else in your place pretending to be you. So we have Molly Rogers.
I'm here.
And then I see Parasa.
Hi, I'm here.
And I
am here.
We have Sam. Sam Core, you there?
Sam Core's here.
Okay, I already saw Brian. Ryan, you here? Ryan Shan's here.
I am here.
Okay. Sanji Moore, you here?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sanji is present.
Thank you. Anybody here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Okay, we already know that Lindsay is here. Cord, you here?
Yes, hi, I'm here.
Excellent. Christina?
I am here.
Okay, this is all I see for staff. And oh, Pamela, are you there? Are you just guys
Yes,
under
I'm here.
a column number 1, 2, 3?
Yes, I'm here, Pamela.
Any other committee members or staff that I haven't called yet? Hearing none, let's see if we have guests other than Brian.
Yeah, this is Stacy Michelson. I do government affairs for the school districts in East Multnomah County. Just listening in.
Hi, Stacy. What else do we have?
So this is Brian again, real quick. I did ask Gina, my office specialist, to additionally attend. She may be plugging in here shortly because she helps with the reporting of the monitoring and compliance and that sort of stuff. So if she's not on, she will be shortly.
Okay, sounds good. Do we have anybody else who has not identified itself yet? Hearing none. Ms. Rogers.
Thank you, Anya. So as we see other people come on, Anya, if you can help, or Lindsay, help just make sure that we invite people to introduce themselves as we go along. The next thing on the agenda is OJDDP and the CJJ update. And Anya, would you be willing to give us the report and update?
Absolutely. So I will start with that everything is going online. So pretty much every update that we received from the OJDP and CJJ from this point, actually I shouldn't say from this point on, since March until indefinite, we've been communicating virtually by email, over the phone, and this is pretty much our modus operandi. So that said, there are several training opportunities that are coming from both CJJ and OJDP. And one of them is the national training that the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention puts out, I don't want to say annually, but as often as they're able. So this year it was going to be in San Diego. That's obviously changed, but the dates remained. And the dates are October 6th through 8th. The agenda has not been released yet, but it's free and it's online. So should any one of you be interested in participating and learning, and by every one of you, I'm sorry, our guests, this is really limited to the committee staff and committee members. Just let me know and I'll send you the registration link once it becomes available. But they'll have several tracks for compliance monitors, for juvenile justice specialists, and for racial and ethnic disparities coordinators, as well as state advisory group members. And state advisory group members, who are all members of this committee, are highly encouraged to participate should you have time and availability and willingness to do so. So that's again October 6th through 8th. One more federal update, which is slightly unexpected. We received a letter on Friday and a follow-up today saying that since Oregon has not provided evidence of compliance with PREA this year, we will have to take a reduction in our Title II allocation for fiscal year 20 and use 5% of that allocation to gain compliance with PREA. That said, 5% of our allocation is estimated to be around $50,000. And I'm saying estimated because we really don't have the firm number of what our 100% fiscal year 20 allocation would have been. So we're estimating that 5% of that might be somewhere around that nature. So Ryan and I had a little chat earlier this morning, and we will have to come up with some plan on how these monies might be applied in order to gain compliance with PREA. So I believe Christina and Molly, I'm mostly speaking to you, and Brian, since you're on the phone as well, we will likely seek some kind of communication with the OGDA to see is there something we can do with the association to help juvenile departments, juvenile detentions to improve their compliance. So anyway, so that's kind of, I don't want to spend any more time on that, but perhaps we can have a conversation. But it's urgent, so because of course we got the letter on Friday and the application is due by the end of this week. So
Anya, this is Molly. Maybe we can talk a bit offline, and maybe for our next meeting, at least be able to explain to all of the subcommittee members what it means to not be in compliance and what were the things that were found that made us not be in compliance. So maybe you and Ryan, we can have that conversation at our next meeting.
Right.
To have a deeper understanding of that.
That sounds good. Thank you. So, but I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that issue that just came up. Now going on to CJJ, the Coalition for Juvenile Justice, which is a national advocacy group that Oregon is participating in. Their conference was originally planned in June. Some of you registered to attend. That was not obviously happening in June, but it will be offered virtually online. The dates are November 18 through 21. Now, since it's online, the registration is a little less than it would have been if people were attending in person. So if you're interested in participating in that training, also please let me know, and I will we will work with Sandy and Serena to see how many more people we might be able to register to participate in that conference as well. And lastly, on the CJJ side, the Youth Summit will be held virtually. Everything like surprise here again. In August, and they're going to do it in a different way from the past. So it's instead of 2 or 1 full days as they had done before, even when it was virtual, they will do it as a series of workshops. And it's from, the first one will start on August 19th, and then August 26th, September 2nd, and September 9th. And it's not limited to only state advisory group youth members. It's open to all youth under the age of 28. So, and it's free, and everybody is encouraged to participate. So perhaps what we'll do as a follow-up to this meeting, with Lindsay's help, we will send you an email saying, well, these are the dates of conferences and trainings. This is who targeted audience is and what's, how widely we can spread this information. But I think it's a great opportunity for youth to learn from each other and from experts. And it's not really limited to people under 28, but people under 28 years of age are encouraged to participate. I don't think they'll ask for your ID as you register. So if you're interested, you may also try. And that pretty much concludes my OJCP and CJJ update at this point. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It doesn't. Because I have a privilege of introducing Cord Bucher to you, who has an update on Senate Bill 15 development. Sorry, Cord, your face disappeared, so I forgot about it.
Thanks, Anya. Sure. So I just want to provide the committee with an update on the rules being developed for compliance monitoring under SB 15. For the record and callers, my name is Cord Bucher, Special Projects Manager with YDD. So I've been working on a new draft of the rules. The timeline that I think I shared with the full council at the last council meeting has been extended. We've kind of slowed down on this. We were, I think, anticipating a much quicker turnaround, but we got some really good feedback in the last meeting we had with a number of different stakeholders. And so we've really been taking our time to try and address a lot of the details that were brought up, requested to be addressed within the rules. So at the moment, right now, last week we were going to be meeting with DOJ to specifically talk about definitions of juveniles and adults and how to align federal and state definitions and situational definitions to ensure that the compliance monitoring rules make it very clear what a individual's status would be in different situations. But that meeting got pushed back to this week. So once we get some of that input from our attorney with DOJ, who's been working on this, I've also been working with Anya, Ryan, and Sanji to get input on the rules in terms of addressing a lot of the specifics of the information to be collected, the process for monitoring, as well as a number of definitions, specifically some definitions that were brought up or requested from stakeholders. So the rules are still in development, and the plan is to, once we have a new draft, to then bring it back to the stakeholder group for another review to get additional input. And hopefully, if we've got something that works pretty well at that point, with some edits, then we'll move forward with getting draft rules out. So then there will be public draft rules, and we'll go into that rulemaking process. And that's it. I can answer any questions, but that's just a brief update.
Thanks, Cord.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Cord. I think the stakeholders conversation was a great one, and lots of input and information shared there. So thank you for guiding that.
Yeah, thanks, Molly.
Okay. So,
right.
Are we now to the compliance monitoring update?
Yeah, so just for the record, I'm Ryan Shands, the compliance monitor for the Youth Development Division in the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, which is what the SB 15 rule writing is kind of centered around for racial ethnic disparities, coordination, and for grant administering and for compliance monitoring as a packaged whole. So right now, my job is to kind of do facility individualized inspections, which has kind of been completely upended by COVID. We're following the governor's guidelines right now for social distancing and the travel restrictions under ODE. So the number of inspections being done right now is not significant whatsoever. And a lot of work was done in those inspections in terms of meeting certain metrics that were required of us for the JGDPA. And so with this pandemic response, there's an opportunity to kind of consider some future policies potentially around if a pandemic were to be extended beyond this year, how we're going to deal with that for compliance and what that's going to look like for facility inspections. So I will be really interested to get some input later on when I'm kind of getting down into the weeds of writing some of this stuff to work with, say, Jeff, Molly, about if there in each of the individual facilities to see if there's any restrictions they have, if there's any kind of new methods for acquiring documents. Maybe we get that all on the front end digitally, and we don't actually handle any paperwork on site, things like that. Another aspect of this is that in order to meet all the requirements, you can either carry those out through doing on-site inspections where you're meeting those metrics, or you do it online where you have a heavier online presence. So with that said, we have adopted the SurveyMonkey Apply grant administering tool right now that we're using to apply for grants. So we're going to be using that for compliance to some extent. And just with regard, we use it for law enforcement right now and have for several years. And one of the metrics we have to meet is identifying facilities. So this is going to play into the rules. And this isn't getting into data per se necessarily, but just in terms of requiring that if an agency oversees a facility that is secured with construction devices and used for custody, that they disclose that facility in the SurveyMonkey Apply system. And in doing so would meet the metric that we are identifying facilities, we have a system to do so, and then the data collection piece will be done later. That's something that obviously we're gonna have more deep discussions on through SB 15. And shaping kind of what that looks like, because we want to make it very specific so people understand what exactly it is we're looking for compliance. So outside of that, there are some co-located facilities, which I think we're going to try to focus heavily on to try to get to this year, because the co-located facilities are one of the few that can get a little hairy for being considered in compliance if you're not doing them. The other facilities we can kind of wait on a little bit until we develop a stronger plan. And that's all I have for right now.
Ryan, so this is Molly. How many co-located facilities are there?
We have 4 right now. It's Jackson, Douglas, Yamhill, and you.
I just wanted to give kind of scope for all of the committee members, the number that we're trying to figure out. Can you raise your hand? Any other for Ryan?
Brian, could you repeat the 4 sites again?
Yeah, it's Jackson County Juvenile Detention Center, Douglas County Juvenile Detention Center, Yamhill County Detention Center, and Norcor are our 4 co-located facilities in the state.
Thank you, Ryan.
There's a lot of
Great.
feedback. I think somebody's line is.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. So we're going to now move to Sonji and an update. And, at the end of Sonji's presentation, we'll make sure we ask for questions again. So for the next few minutes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanji Moore. I am the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator for Juvenile Crime Prevention. And of course, we know that since May, there has been a lot of unrest and a new movement regarding and surrounding racial injustice and social injustice. And so it's really kind of put a spotlight on some of the things within our system that have festered and infected certain groups of people, and the things that the work that we still need to do. And so one thing that is a big component of what I'm doing right now is trying to develop a way, in conjunction with Anya and Sandy, for us to award our RED money from the Title II grant to address RED. And we are having conversations about having a late fall start date for these programs. So tentatively sometime around November. And right now we will keep you all updated on the progress of that work and let you know for your approval at some point as an entire council, but we will also brief the Juvenile Justice Committee meeting, and it will likely be before our next Juvenile Justice Committee meeting, which is, I believe, slated for November 3rd. So our update to you will either be electronic communication or a special meeting or potentially a special called Youth Development Council meeting so that we can get your approval to get the funds dispersed. Are you not able to hear me? Oh, okay. And so that is that. I've been doing a lot of engagement with some targeted counties. Multnomah County, I've been involved in an ongoing LIPSIC RED subcommittee work that has began before I arrived. It began in the fall of last year, and COVID kind of put a pause on it, and it's picking back up. And so we meet weekly to try to determine how to address racial and ethnic disparities because of their MacArthur Foundation project. And so just offering my contribution and my perspective about some of the work that they may be able to do in the direction that they want to go in for that. I've had the opportunity to sit on in a couple of meetings with the crossover youth work that Christina and Clackamas County are doing as it relates to racial and ethnic disparities, more in an observatory manner at this time, but learning and getting background, and hopefully we'll be able to offer some contribution to that work soon. Has had some talks with Washington County as well as it relates to racial and ethnic disparities. And I potentially very strong potential that I will be participating in some training that will bring my perspective from a cultural standpoint and some lived experience. And until that's formalized, I will just leave it at that, but offering basically a co-facilitating, a co-instructing of courses with stakeholders that brings a cultural component from my standpoint to the training that that stakeholder group is doing. The OYA, the Juvenile Directors Association, YDD, the Alliance have been working on a continuum statement to release as a response to the social unrest, and that is still being developed, and have had some conversations about that and some roadblocks, unfortunately. So at some point, hopefully before the end of August, that statement will be released, and YDD will be expressly a signature on that letter showing our disappointment in what's going on and our commitment to rededicate ourselves to this work, along with some of the stakeholders that I just named. Something that was very encouraging and hopeful is that with OJDDA, I recommended that they consider starting a racial and ethnic disparities subcommittee within the association, and they accepted that. And so last week was our first meeting, and the members present just need final approval from their board to make that a standing committee within OJDDA. So that was very encouraging. But we also learned, again, how much work we need to do in this area, and some of the roadblocks and barriers that we're facing when it comes to this work. So this will be a tri-partnership with YDD, OJDDA, and OYA. Each one of us will have a representative serving as a tri-chair, which was a new thing to me, and that's something that I just made up. I don't know if it's true, the true way to address it, but there are three co-chairs, myself, tentatively interim basis rather, Nakia Daniels from OYA, and then also Jennifer Clearly from Washington County Juvenile Department. And I'm very encouraged about the work that we're going to do, but we learned a lot from that session and how we need to continue to approach this work. One of the unfortunate things that we learned is that one of our stakeholders has had some unfortunate strained relationships with another stakeholder group because of their attempting to try to be very deliberate about addressing racial and ethnic disparities. And they've gotten some almost, my interpretation of it as bullying from other stakeholder groups. So that's another barrier about trying to get everyone on the same page when addressing this work. We learned recently that, everybody's at different levels of perspective about race relations. Some people more advanced and some people more progressive than others. And one thing that we learned recently is that some of our partners are not as progressive in their views as when it comes to race relations. And so those are some barriers that, one thing I am glad that these people are, even though I strongly disagree with them, obviously, I'm glad that they are expressing their hesitancy to be bold and deliberate about this work, because it lets you know who you really need to focus on and who may not be able to have their mind changed. So in that lesson, some of the things that I took away from it was that we really need to work on some type of toolkit for counties to address racial and ethnic disparities, kind of a one-stop shop for resources, information. OYA is currently undertaking a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And so they hired an outside vendor to come in and kind of evaluate and assess their practices, their policies, their workforce. And so they're going to be sharing a lot of that information. And hopefully some of the county juvenile departments will take that on and see how that they can implement some of these practices potentially into their juvenile departments. And some of these things may not incur a cost. So that was good to learn that there are resources out there that are free that juvenile departments specifically and other stakeholders can take advantage of, in addition to seeking more intricate assistance outside of what I may be able to offer, or from other experts in the field. Another thing that we learned is that we need to decide on a common language. How do we define race? How do we define, discrimination? How do we define ethnicity? How do we define white supremacy, if that's a term that, we agree to be bold in using? A common glossary of the language that relates to our ED, so that everybody that is an Oregon juvenile justice stakeholder can be on the same page. I know the Department of Education kind of has a standing glossary of how they define diversity, equity, inclusion related terms, and maybe we can use that as inspiration. But that is a hope that we can continue to do in the committee that I just spoke of. And one thing that we also learned is that we need to really hone in on the lived experience of the people that we're serving, the youth that are affected by racial and ethnic disparities, and hearing their voices. Unfortunately, YDD had a youth summit that had to be postponed, but I'm thinking maybe we can have some kind of virtual town hall. And then I also hope to try to develop some type of survey that can be disseminated to youth of color to get their experience with specific information and questions that can be disaggregated to determine some of the things. And of course, open-ended questions that can determine, the experience of youth of color in the juvenile justice system and how they are affected by this. And of course, that is then connected strongly to family engagement. Hope to really ramp up engaging the families of these youth, because we know that the risk factors a lot of times start within the home, and the culture and the background, the socioeconomic status, so many different factors regarding environment of the youth can also contribute to racial and ethnic disparities. One thing that I also hope to do is to get a dashboard up on our website to really have kind of the most current data so that people can, and I got this inspiration from another state's website, can actually look at the numbers. It's, published yearly in JGIS, but in this dashboard, a person could go in and click, let's say, Multnomah County, and see how their disparities are broken down by race and by decision point, in comparison to statewide and in comparison to maybe national average. So that's something that was an inspiration to me in the past couple of days, that hopefully that YDD can do something similar on the RED component of the website. And actually, I'm going to speed up because I know my time is coming close to an end. One thing that there has been a lot of discussion about is the accuracy of the JGIS data, especially as it relates to relative rate index and the RED reports that they put out. So we hope to be able to work with counties to be able to see how to really disaggregate those numbers even further. And, one of our partners in the meeting said that basically some of the counties are so small that, they can basically look at a number and trace it back to the actual incident, because there are so few, occurrences that, they may be able to really assess what happened and potentially what led to that disparity and what actions they may be able to change to help eliminate that. And the final thing I wanted to say is that, a common thing that's occurring right now, again, is a lot of people, entities, organizations, agencies, on such a rampant scale, reiterating the need for training. And as someone who just came from the classroom, I thought about, if I had a student that wasn't doing good and not passing tests, not their performance was poor in the classroom, it was either a combination, either my teaching, their ability to learn from my teaching, or a combination of both. And I feel like we've done so much training, like probably everybody on this line, and there is a need for training. Training has to be continued, and training should be updated. It should be refreshed, on a set basis. But, most of us on this call have probably done some type of implicit bias training, or some type of diversity, equity, inclusion related training, or race relations training. And at what point do we take the material that we're being trained with and assess and implement and then reevaluate its effectiveness. And so it made me think that, you know, either we need to evaluate the type of training, who's given the training, or if it's the student who is not receiving the training and being able to actualize it into practice, then we need to modify the delivery, because we know that, you know, every person learns differently. And, you know, the Department of Education, school districts, teachers have realized the need for individualizing sometimes the delivery of teaching. And so one thing that I finally thought about is that the best way, in my opinion, for someone to know the experience of a person of color is to walk in their shoes. Molly, Christina, Anya, Lindsay, Judge Abernathy, the women, white women on this call will never know what it's like to be a Black woman, because they've never had to walk in my shoes as a Black woman. Ryan will never know what it's like to be a Black man. Only Beatty knows that, you know. And so one thing that I hope that I can maybe help develop and maybe be innovative in is developing some type of experiential training where people can kind of simulate what it's like a day in the life, a moment in the life of a person of color, especially as it relates to the juvenile justice system. And maybe that would help shift perspective on why this work perpetuates and continues, and why we need to do more to try to figure out how to address it and reverse it. So, you know, I open my email, my phone, my meeting time to any conversation about what your thoughts are about anything that I've said, and look forward to working with you all as we forge ahead. Thank you for listening to me in my soapbox. Any questions or comments for me?
Hey Sanji, this is Ryan. I don't mind volunteering myself at any point to take any kind of, you know, as you're developing out some of these tests or metrics or things, you know, just kind of get some volunteer participation. So just putting myself out there for later.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, Ryan, for that.
Thank you, Ryan.
Pamela. This
Yeah,
is
Pamela.
I just wanted to make a comment on your last suggestion. I just think that day in the life or walking in your shoes kind of training is so important. It, you know, I, like, as you suspect, have you know, done implicit bias training and led some myself, etc. But I just read, you know, Between the World and Me, and the thing that struck me about that book was how poetic it was, and that it got me on a different level, like a visceral level and a deeper understanding of something that I fundamentally can never truly understand. But I do think that that kind of training, you know, like good theater that gets to not just the left brain, but the right brain, gets to people emotionally. I do think that that is really a fabulous next step. So I applaud your idea and support you 100% in that. And I'd love to do it. I'm done now. I'm going to mute.
Thank you so much, Judge Abernathy. I really appreciate that.
Any other? Yes, go ahead.
So
is that Tabitha? Yes.
Sabiki, is it Sonia? Is that correct?
Sanji.
Sanji, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Oh, no worries.
Sanji.
And it's our first time kind of formally meeting. So hi, nice to meet you.
Yes. Hello, nice to meet you. I'm sorry, I'm late to the meeting because I had a couple of meetings right before this and they went over. So please, I apologize to everyone. So your last comment, my wife and I have put together a workshop that she's in the field of medicine that actually simulates, we've sort of trademarked this iteration that's applicable to different fields, the game of life, that does just that, where it flips, it takes the concept of the game of life and we actually, we simulate what that means in different fields. So we did it for medicine, and for this, it would be perfect because it would take the understanding of implicit bias, works like The Color of Law, How to Be Anti-Racist, some of my own work, but just this idea of here's what we understand theoretically, we're going to actually imply it, and we move through the game, and it really resonates. So and then that opens us up to the next components of the kind of workshopping that we do to kind of to break this stuff out. So I like your comment. You're right on board, and you know, maybe you know how that happens system wide. You know, all of these things have you know, this training. You know, what kind of resources are available to do it, but I'll just say I like what you're saying, and we definitely have something.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. And, you know, I would love to, you know, learn about what you and your wife have put together, and then see, you know, how we can translate it over to the juvenile justice system, and, you know, a broader look at just race relations in general, for people of color and these disparities that they experience, that we experience.
No, and it absolutely allows people, you're put into the different roles and you begin to see where that takes you. And so, yeah.
Right. And I, you know, just, it dawned on me that, you know, because we had some conversations, and, you know, even just seeing some of the responses that are happening real time across the country, that it may not be connecting, because some people still don't think this is a problem. You know, some people still think that Black people, you know, Hispanic people, Native American people are just fine. You know, you just need to do X, Y, Z, and, you know, you're the reason, not the system, not the institutions, not us. So maybe if people can kind of have an experience, you know, it just goes back to empathy, walking in someone's shoes about, you know, and maybe that gives you a different perspective on where they're coming from. And, you know, we talked about lived experience a lot. So just kind of a swapping, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be majority experiencing minority. Like, you know, it could go both ways, like people of color simulating what, you know, white people experience, or how they live, or how, you know, their experiences. So just
Yeah,
the light
workshop, the game it does just what you're saying. It flips it for everybody, and everyone is playing, but you don't get to be where you are as far as race and ethnicity. And so if I'm a person of color, I get to be a white male or a white female, and by, you know, and so then people are moving and are getting a chance to experience what that feels like, right? And how you progress in the game actually opens it up to the next level of conversation, which is back to the material that backs this up, right?
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Great conversation. Thank you so much, Sanji. The meeting I know the other day with OJDDA was fun. It was difficult, and we now have tri-chairs, and I think I heard that no one had experienced that yet. So thanks to all that were willing to do that. I am going to kind of keep this moving because I think we have some decisions that we have to make, and we have a quorum, so I want to make sure we move forward. Anya, do you want to touch base with us around the 2018 and 2019 school programs and improvement funds discussion?
I do, but I also wanted to comment on Sanjay's and Tabiri's conversation. So for one thing, I cannot wait to see the results of your collaboration, the adjusted curriculum that you'll be working on, and I will be actually, I don't know if it's presumptuous of me to assume that you will be looking for volunteers. So I will be delighted to volunteer to experience the curriculum on myself, and hopefully the committee members will be joining me in that interest, and then we will just take it from there, because I'm excited. I really am. I think it's going to be awesome.
Thank you, Anya, very much.
Well, thank you, Sanjay, and thank you to Biddy for volunteering. You know, it's recorded. It's on the minutes that you volunteered yourself and your wife. Anyway, so the reason I wanted to chat with you about fiscal year 18 and 19, two particular areas of funding, is that things have changed, as we all know, since the time we applied for this funding and put together a 3-year plan to the YDC. Remember, the plan goes back to fiscal year 17. So it's 17, 18, and 19. So 18 and 19 are second and third year of the funding cycle. And initially what we had planned for, let's start with school programs, because these are two separate conversations. I mean, they're similar, but they're separate in a way. So the first, let's talk about school programs. And Sam, I need your help here. Initially, the school programs intended to fund a transition specialist position, helping kids move from educational setting within a physical, I'm emphasizing the word physical, detention, to back to, again, physical school. So there's some movement involved. It's not an online learning we're talking about. It's helping a child who has been detained for a certain period of time and not moving on to Oregon Youth Authority, but is being released back into community to help support that transition from detention into regular school and resume more or less normal life. And so we've developed a pilot that was very successful, and the pilot was developed through Georgetown School Justice Partnership capstone project, and we implemented it in Yamhill County, and it's been very successful. And I'm delighted to tell you that the county is continuing the project after the federal funding has ended, because we only funded for 3 years. So now we have $100,000 in fiscal year 18 and the same amount in 19 that we intended to put out either through competitive bidding process or identify a detention facility in need of such service. That would be something for the committee discussion. However, is that still relevant given the climate we're in? And by climate we're in, I mean the virus, the online learning, all of that. So would that still be something worth funding and investing in currently? Or are there other ways to invest the funding where it's really needed? So I would like to have this conversation with you. If you have better ideas, so basically there are multiple versions of answers to this question. The basic question is, should we go on with the plan as we initially thought was going to work, to put this funding out for transition type services from detention to regular schools? That was the first. If that's so, do we have a detention facility in mind? And that's, I'm kind of hoping Sam would help here. Is there a serious need, because she keeps track of all this data? And third option, with multiple answers possible to it, if that's not the way we want to continue going, what is the right path to do that? At this point, I would like to entertain your thoughts, and I will mute myself.
So Anya, this is Molly. I'm going to kind of try to organize this so it's a really inclusive discussion, and that we don't talk over each other. So if you would like to share, and please just note it in the chat box because I have that going. And then I'm going to ask first, and I'll try to do this first and then again a little bit later. Are any of the people on the phone that are not on the GoToMeeting but just called in, do you have any comments you would like to share about Anya's 3 questions? Okay. Now, anybody that's on the view, does anybody want to ask her clarifying questions, give input? Please let me know through the chat box so that we can have a kind of a rich discussion. Okay, Sam, actually, thank you so much. I was going to ask you to directly. So can you kind of give us your perspective, Sam?
Yes, hi, hello. This is Sam from ODE. So, and for those of you that don't know, at ODE, I have multiple, we have multiple programs. We have the day and residential treatment, the OIA facilities, the detention facilities, the hospitals, and the pediatric nursing. And except for the hospitals, out of our programs where we track the dropout rate for JDEP is the highest by far. It's like in the high 20s, low 30s versus YCEP and LTCT in the high like 8 or 7 or 9%. And we attribute that because of the amount of kids in JDEP that don't return back to the neighborhood K-12 school. Because the way the law is written, once a kid enters the county detention facility, they have to be unenrolled from the regular school district. But then once they leave, we find that they're not returning back to the regular school district. So the need for reentry services or transition is tremendous. And in our contract for this year, for this biennium, all the JDEP sites have a transition specialist. And unfortunately, not all the JDEP sites participate in Title I-D neglected and delinquent. And Yamhill School District, McVinville School District, where Yamhill is, does not participate, so they don't get federal funding to help with their reentry. So it's a federal statute that if you do receive Title I and D, you have to spend 50 to 30% on reentry transition, but unfortunately, not all the JDEP sites receive that federal fund. So there is a need to help reconnect our students back to their K-12 schools, and especially now with perhaps most, if not all, school districts going to distance learning because they're not going to meet the metric on the COVID for the counties. That reconnection back to their school districts is imperative. Otherwise, they may get lost between the cracks. And I'm more than happy to share data if you want. I can pull it up and share it if you want, our dropout rate.
So Sam, maybe let's check in, but I want to make sure I heard 3 questions, but TB makes a good point. What 3 questions are we looking for, Anya? Is this a need and continues to be a need? What does transition look like? And maybe I don't know what the 3rd one was.
And the 3rd one is another option.
All right. If not, what would the other option be?
If not, what would that be?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Any other? Christina, do you have any kind of experience about kids coming in and out of detention right now? Your experience?
We do. We don't operate in Clackamas, our own detention facility. We utilize Multnoma's, but I do have a position that is funded through the Workforce Partnership, and we get funding, partial funding through the ESD, and it really focuses on young people that are returning to Clackamas County from youth correctional facilities and some of our higher risk kids, and those kids tend to be have had more episodes in detention. So when Sam was talking about the higher dropout rates for kids in JDEP, that was resonating as very true to the experiences that I've seen in our county. So we have that individual who works trying to get kids back connected and then also helping them get their GEDs when they've already dropped out. We're just starting up. It got delayed because of COVID. We repurposed a position in our department to create an educational advocate position where this person is going to work with kids that are disconnected and try to keep them from being expelled or suspended, and have individual attention so that she can help them figure out what is best for them to be successful and get back into the school routine. So we haven't been able to start that because of the schools being closed down, but we've decided we're starting it in the fall because we have a feeling kids are going to be not participating in online, especially the older kids. So those are just some of my thoughts. My wheels were turning about that whole idea of educational advocacy and what that can look like. When I was in Multnomah County, we tried to do a similar thing. We used a contracted provider, but I think there's some real difficulties with relationships at times between juvenile justice and particular schools or school districts in terms of getting on the same page of how we can join forces to help young people. So I don't know, my wheels are turning about that whole school to prison pipeline and what can we do sooner in the process rather than later in the process to try to help these kids. But so you just put me on the spot, Molly. I gave you some rambling thoughts. Sorry if that was too rambling.
No, that's great. And Stacy Michelson gave some great comments in the chat. So I think everybody can read it. Thank you, Stacy, for putting that in. For what she states is, for what it's worth, as a guest in Multnomah County ESD has funding through the Black African American Student Success Plan to run what we call the Bars to Bridges program, which does some of that transition work for our Black students. Our staff have expressed a wish to be funded to provide that service to all students. Mm-hmm. So I think from my perspective, it really has been with COVID-19 in the online. I think has been even more difficult to maintain continuity of education for youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system for a couple different reasons. One is some technology and lack of access, but the other is how to figure out what school they're registered in and transitioning from school to school when juvenile justice youth tend to bounce from district to district. And so I think Yan did a presentation at OJDDA conference about their transition program that was funded through YDD and how successful it was. And it was their statistics were pretty amazing when that was done. I think it was in Bend, Anya. I can't remember. I just remember sitting in and being in awe that the person was able to connect kids back to their schools. Any other hands? Oh, can you please, Tabidi, can you please explain that more? I have medical concerns for those in detention. I'm interested. Do you mind sharing?
Well, what are the Yeah, so my concerns, I mean, really, it's a conundrum because, you know, doing detention, if they're in detention, what are the protocols? What kind of, is it a safe environment to keep them from, you know, coming down with COVID? I think people have been paying attention to the many issues taking place with people who are incarcerated and that are suffering from COVID, et cetera. And then we don't even know what if they have any pre-existing medical complications that may exacerbate COVID, right? So maybe they are sickle cell, they present with sickle cell. Maybe they have some kind of heart issue. Maybe they have some pulmonary dynamics. You know, I don't know, right? So those are all factors that make that, and you're in a tight space, and, you know, there's going to be extra expenses tied to trying to, and I'm only saying this from the university dynamic where we're just doing distance because, you know, many universities don't have the capacity. So I'm trying to figure out what do our detention centers have that exceed that. I mean, you know, so then the other side is what I pointed out regarding, you know, what if the students don't have a Chromebook, or can we get them access to that? Who are they getting support that's necessary, and how many of them may or may not be behind, and is there a way to keep them, you know, tied to this? I mean, right now I'm in the university and we're doing training with professors around in learning how to increase their online presence, okay? And so so that students don't become dissatisfied or you know, just say forget it, I give up, which is happening with students who are, you know, admitted to college. So I mean, this is what concerns me. Sorry for the negative, but this is what concerns me.
No, I really appreciate what's on your mind. I think that's great that you're sharing that with us. I'm going to try to see if I can't get some answers. So I want to check in with the committee members. Do we still think that looking at transition for the school programs is important? And I guess the only question I would have, Anya, in doing this is there any way for us, and Sam, I'm going to lean on you heavy on this, if we are still looking at transition programs and the school piece, like what Yanhill has done, making sure that the districts that are involved do receive Title I 4D funds, or are able to potentially, I don't know if we want to make it a requirement, but it truly seems like it could potentially leverage or add to those funds if at all possible in those jurisdictions.
Okay, this is Sam. I can talk about the Title 1D. It has, okay, so.
We need you to speak up. Your mic got really quiet, Sam.
Okay, how about now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I guess I gotta take off my camera. Okay, so
Now we lost you again.
how about now?
Not very well.
Hey, Sam, I think your best bet is probably going to be to call in the number real quick because there might be something going on with your.
Anya, do you want to, while Sam's calling back in?
I just want to comment. So if I'm hearing you all correctly, we will continue with the overall goal of supporting transition services for kids in detention going into school of origin. However, it may look differently today from what it did a year ago. So with that, we could put out a request for applications and put some expectations around it, including what was just mentioned was school districts with certain funding. That can be all done. So perhaps what we could do is draft request for proposal or applications, and I'll see, I could work with Sam on what it might look like, and we will ask any committee members who might be interested in the development of criteria for funding to help us out with that, because as always, there are some federal restrictions that we have to meet, as well as federal expectations. But other than once those are met, we can put additional parameters around any grants that we issue as the committee deems fit.
That sounds good. That stays in line, so we don't have to do an amendment to the. So how about system improvement funds?
System improvements funds, that's they were set aside, I don't want to say just in case, but with the expectation of some findings from an assessment of juvenile justice system of Oregon for its adherence to the principles of developmental approach. We've received the draft report that was not quite timely or comprehensive, and I know Molly and Christina have been part of that group and that work. But the idea was that once the report is released and some areas for improvement have been identified, we could potentially dedicate some federal funds to resolve the issues. However, there weren't really issues identified in the report that require funding to fix. So with that, we have $50,000 in fiscal year 18, and then we have $30,000 in fiscal year 19. The difference in amounts is because we got a reduction in federal funds. So what I'm opening to this group, and eventually we can solicit help from the OJDA, is what would be the best investment for this funding. There are multiple options here. We could invest in training, we could invest in, we can issue, I'm just speaking out loud, thinking out loud rather. We can issue one big grant to somebody who will go around the state and do training. We can issue little grants to do local training. We can do anything, pretty much. It's a very, I think from my experience working with federal funding, this is the most open one. So pretty much anything can qualify as system improvement, just as long as it aims to improve the system, obviously.
So Anya, this is the first time, and we have a few more things we need to kind of talk about and touch base on. I think introducing it to this group today and letting them kind of resonate and kind of visit with the OJDDA. I know we've had lots of ideas. Sonji's subcommittee's got some ideas. This might be a venue to look at systems across. I know that we've had conversations at both OYA and OJDDA about data and how to make sure data is collected similarly, kind of system improvement work, and being able to get some data out and support reports done. So I really appreciate maybe just letting this one set, if that's okay with you this time, and having some conversations in between now and our November meeting, and maybe being able to give more direction in November. Or do we need to give direction today?
You don't need to give direction today, but I would appreciate if we got a sense of direction before November. And I'll explain to you why. Ideally, we should be issuing awards in alliance with the federal funding cycle, which would be October 1, but it's obviously a little too late for this year. It wouldn't be any harm then if we issue the funds, issue an award starting January 1. But going any further than that would be challenging because the money has an expiration date. It really does. So with that, I would ask the committee to maybe volunteer a couple of people to work with me and YDD staff on trying to figure out what would be the best way. Do we, like, what form of engagement will it take to get to solicit OGDA input or OY input or any other partners? And do we need to go that broadly or do we keep it within? But anyway, I would like to have 2 or 3 very bright heads, bright brains, and shining hearts to help me figure out what our next steps will be. And hopefully we can have something solid before the November meeting, like within the next couple of months, like say October. I know September is right here around the corner, but if we could have a little get together, well, for now, everybody can think. I mean, I encourage you and I ask you, put on your thinking heads. And it doesn't have to be like a meeting. If you can think of something, just, let's have an open communication. I think part of the learning experience and learning curve to me is the ways we used to communicate before are kind of obsolete. So I don't even know if we need to have meetings or just like, hey, I just thought of something. Why don't I call you? I don't know. I'm pretty, as you know, most of you, pretty informal in this, but.
So maybe could, Anya, that's great. Committee members, please kind of raise your hand and let Anya know. And maybe Anya doing just a small subgroup of this, or not subgroup, but just a small committee member giving us a date and a time, and those of us that can call in and participate in the meeting will call in and participate in the meeting, and then we can get it out to the larger group so that we have a direction. I would encourage all, and a few of our members that aren't on today, maybe reaching out to them to make sure, because we don't have Parisha was here, but she had to hop off. Our other youth members, typically we have 4 or 5 youth members, so maybe reaching out to see if they have some interest in participating in a ad hoc, kind of a one-time subcommittee. Does that seem reasonable?
Sure. We'll follow up with an email saying that we will solicit your input and would like to form a little advisory group.
Okay, Anya, I'm going to look at the agenda and you tell me what do we need to get done before the meeting ends at 3. What are our action items and and let's move those to the top.
Thank you, Molly. Yeah, see, this was a very ambitious agenda.
Very.
It's really hard to,
It was great.
Questions that we have, and I would never ever want to cut them. But anyway, so what really needs to happen today, there are 2 items that need your recommendations. So if we could, Lindsay, if you don't mind putting those committee materials on the screen, so we should talk about Yamhill and Douglas County applications and Multnomah County, because these are the ones that will have to be voted on by the council in September. So let me just briefly remind you, so Yamhill County, and everything has been delayed and we're way behind on this. Our timeline is just like completely off. And I'm gonna blame the virus on it. So Yamhill County applied for the extended detention program back in October. The committee reviewed it in November. We had some questions to Yamhill County. They answered their questions. Scott Tash came to the meeting in February and answered most of our questions. So the next step was to do a site visit to Yamhill County, which we were not able to do because of the COVID situation. But I believe that we've gathered enough information and Scott answered enough questions that the physical visit may not be that necessary, given that we've been to the detention facility on multiple occasions. And they will be only using this program to maybe 1 or 2 kids, if that. within a calendar year. So what will be the committee's comfort zone here? Recommend for approval, do a site visit prior to recommendation. I'll leave it open to you.
I'll open it up to discussion of the committee members. Scott was at our last meeting and spent about an hour visiting with us. And so if there are any questions, and rewrote the application. So the virtual site tours, it's a great idea and an interesting idea. I know Ryan's been trying to think about and work on some things around what a virtual might be for the compliance. It's slightly tricky because we can't have any pictures of any youth on the videos. So there's a bit of a challenge there. But I think we probably could work with the counties to get a virtual of the actual space. So I think there's 3 options. We could delay approval till we reviewed the virtual. We could approve the application and request a virtual, or 3, approve the application and then do a physical site review once COVID restrictions are relaxed. So those are the kind of the 3 options. Oh, great, Sam. Thank you. So I think that's probably an option for us to do, and we could talk to the facility to do that. Pleasure of the group.
I think if there's a way to do it by video, if that can be worked out, that would be the preference, because it's coming up on almost a year since they submitted their application. So if it can be worked out for the virtual, I think that's obviously in the best interest of everybody.
Great. Thank you, Christina. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, what happens if they are not able to accommodate this request?
So Anya, can you tell us if anybody on this committee, yourself, Sam, Ryan, have any of you guys toured the Yamhill County Juvenile, or Christina, or anybody else on it? Has anybody toured the Yamhill County Detention Facility?
So John Teague and I and you, Molly, toured the facility, 2 or 3 years ago when they applied for the same program. I do not believe the facility changed that much, nor did the program.
I was
and you go to and Sam was there as well, and Sam goes on his own. So Ryan, when was the last time you were in Yamhill?
Oh, I want to say I could look at the exact date, which I don't have, but it was probably around between October of last year and February of this year. Actually, probably October of last year.
So I actually wasn't on that tour. I've been on the rest of them. Yamhill was the only one I wasn't able to go on.
Oh, right. That's right.
But
You went to Josephine.
But what I will tell you is that I think your question is a good point. I think we really did do extra questioning with Yamhill on their programming piece. So really around the extended detention, a lot of it is on the programming and the engagement with the youth, rather than the facility they don't change that much. It really has been more around the programming. And so I think the recommendation, because I agree that we've made this one sit out there a long time, really at no responsibility from the program, is if we could move forward and approve it and then ask for a virtual tour as soon as we are able to. And then also as soon as the COVID restrictions are lifted, that a couple of the committee members who are, if they're interested in touring, that we're able to make those site visits. So as a chair, I think that would be my preference, is so we can make sure that these programs have gone to the trouble to make sure they're making application to us. Anyway.
Molly, when did their certificate, this says it's a recertification, so when did their certification expire?
Yeah, so this is part where the whole rules are not completely done yet, and this is what we've been working on. In rule is, it really hasn't, there's not really an expiration date.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to fix in rule.
I'm trying to see what the year, hold on a second, I'm opening my files here. So the last time they were certified in 2014. But again, going back to Molly's, it's not the facility that is really in question. It's visiting the staff who's working in that facility with the kids who would be in the program, is making sure that all educational requirements are met, which is Sam's purview. And yeah, it's not really inspecting the facility as is. It's an on-site visit to talk with people who work there, including youth.
Yes, in regards to the program. So it's not detention youth, it's the programmatic work.
We're not looking at what the conditions of confinement are there. That's Ryan's sort of area of expertise.
Yeah,
and Ryan, yeah, and you said that you were there recently.
Yeah, I did a review. I have to do the co-located facilities every single year. And so I was there visiting with Scott, late last year sometime. I can tell you all from my experience being there that there was no facility changes whatsoever, to structure or use of confinement or anything. Obviously the programmatic policy and staff turnover are the things that do periodically change. So.
Okay, I'm going to actually hop. We have 3 votes that need to be taken, and we have 7 minutes. We have 6 minutes to get them done. Because we're going to lose quorum, I believe. I really want to get to the Multnomah County one. Is there any on the Multnomah County change amendment? Is there a motion? Have people been able to review it? And can we move on that particular one?
Molly, I have had a chance to review it, and I am very familiar with this. I was part of the implementation team that put this work together collaboratively to put this program in place. So obviously, I know a little bit about it. I have kept up with what they're doing over the years. I've been gone 4 years, and I hired the person a year ago who also was in charge of overseeing this for the Latino network. So they continue to do really great work, and it fits a gap in Multnomah County. I don't think Dina's on this call, or we could ask her, but the gap in Multnomah County is that they had focused a lot of their resources prior to this program on the deep end of the system, and there wasn't enough for early intervention, and kids were starting to dip their toe in involvement with juvenile justice. So I think this is in total keeping with what the JCP funds are supposed to be about. So I don't want to cut off any discussion, but in the interest of time, I'd be happy to put a motion out to approve their request to modify their plan so that they can use their funding to go to the Community Healing Initiatives Early Intervention Program to support that.
Perfect. So Sam also did that. So I'm going to accept Sam's motion, and Christina, if you'll consider yours a second.
I'm happy to be the second. I hadn't kept up on chat. Sorry.
Okay. Are there any opposed? I'm going to take that as consensus in this new way of doing votes. By all means, if there's any opposition, I'd be glad to hear it. I'm also now going to run quickly to and take the 2 detention facility ones together. I don't want to lose the train of thought here, so I want to keep moving forward on that. But can we, without any, is there a motion to accept the 2 extended detentions? Understanding we're going to want to follow up with a virtual tour.
Molly, is it possible to do an like a temporary, I don't know what you would call it, an extension of their certification through the end of the year, and then hope that, or whatever date makes sense in this COVID world, with the caveat that it's being extended with final approval pending an in-person site visit, by blank date?
I think definitely we could do, I think we could do at least till the end of the next fiscal year, and June 30th of 2021. And if we haven't been able to get a site visit done by then, reevaluate it, but it'd be just an extension of what they've proposed until June 30th of 2021.
Yeah. And then the caveat would be that there would be an in-person site visit by the team.
Yes.
Okay.
As soon as it becomes possible.
Yeah, as soon as possible. Hopefully before then, but
my goodness.
Yeah. I don't want to tie anybody's hands.
Okay.
Is there any opposition to that? Oh yes, true. I thank you so much, Sam, for reminding me. On Douglas County's, the site visit was done with the recommendation to approve it. Thank you so much for reminding me of that. I just wasn't able to participate.
Okay, let me just recap quickly. So Multnomah County request for amending their JCP plan has been approved and it will be recommended for approval by the YDC. Yamhill County is tentatively approved pending a site visit once it becomes possible by the end of June, by June 30th, 2021. And Douglas County is recommended for approval as they have been reviewed, visited, and no issues have been found. Correct?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we have time for fun.
That's all yours. Sorry.
Lindsay, could you? I muted myself. What an idiot. I muted myself thinking that I'm moving the agenda away. I think I need coffee. Lindsay, could you put the Mpc evaluation on, please?
And Anya, I'm not sure if you saw the comment that for Yamhill County, that was, as Christina recommended, to be an extension. Okay. I think she just responded. Oh.
Thank you. And again, those recommendations will go to YDC in September. This committee recommends. Every decision is finalized by the YDC as a council. So Lindsay has kindly put on the screen the JCP evaluation done by Mpc Research. We sent it to you earlier with the hope and expectation that that would be your weekend reading. I hope everybody read it and found it fascinating. That was probably not a very funny joke. but the thing about this evaluation, just a quick reminder. So JCP funds go to 36 counties and 9 federally recognized tribes. This is our way to keep track of outputs and outcomes by getting an outside evaluator to look up the data, analyze it, and show us two things: whether the kids who were served by JCP programs committed a new crime, or the kids committed a crime if they are non-offenders. So those are, and those two groups of kids, non-offender kids and offender kids, are measured differently. Kids who are quote unquote offender kids, in other words, they have been caught. They had an encounter with the juvenile justice system and were referred to a juvenile department. These kids are tracked by juvenile justice information system. And forgive me if you know all of it so much better than I. Of course you do, but some of us may not. So I'm just repeating it for the sake of that. So this particular evaluation is only limited to these kids because they were referred to the juvenile justice information system. They were selected for this evaluation not because they were special, but because we did not have a combined information for the other group. The reason we didn't have information for the other group is because we did not have, and we still don't, have a database that would collect that information and prepare it for analysis. However, I'll jump into the second part of my little report here, is that data manager, which will be, well, in a way, an alternative to JGIS, is very close to being released. I don't know how close, but very close. So once that database is up and running, we will have the missing group information. By missing group, I mean kids who are not offender kids, those who have been served by community-based services or by juvenile departments without formal processing. So the numbers here are fewer than kids who were really served, but the results are still pretty relevant. So we looked at, the Mpc research looked at whether the kids committed crime or not, but also what I think is really interesting is the change in risk and protective factors, and that's what the evaluation is about. Because the kids get assessed by JCP assessment tool when they enter the service, and at either 6 months or upon exit from the service, using the same tool, but a couple of questions might be different. And the idea is we want to increase their protective factors and decrease their risk factors. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read the evaluation. It's the whole thing. If you have a minute at some point, I would encourage you to do so. But what's interesting in this particular one is there are some high level results that have been highlighted by Mpc research, such as reduction in risk, but also what kind of risk. I think it's really important. I think it's on page 4 that 73%, there was a 73% reduction in aggressive disruptive behavior at school during the past month, which I think is great. It's a great outcome if we're looking at the one. Running away have been reduced, as well as behavior that hurt others. And school-related outcomes, Sam, you'll be proud. School dropout was reduced by 45%. And other things. So I'm not going to read the entire evaluation to you. I just want you to know that it's been done, it's available. And also, this is a statewide one, but data reports and data summaries with high-level sort of overview are available to every county and every tribe. For the counties with the caveat if the information was entered into JGIS. And for the tribes, all tribes were evaluated separately by Mpc research. So we have that on that level. So if you're a county whose information was entered into JGIS, you can ask Mpc research directly to provide that data set to you with the summary of their findings. So we will make sure that this technical assistance is available to everybody who receives funds. And in the future, once the data manager, the alternative, an additional database is up and running, we'll have a full report. And fingers crossed for this current biennium, we'll have a full evaluation of services. So that's my JCP evaluation and data manager update.
Thank you. That is, it's a great report. I am the nerdy type that read it and am very grateful that we were able to do that. And it kind of leads itself into the next topic, which is the 21-23 JCP planning process.
I'm muted again. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you so much. See, you can read my mind now. So with the process, this is a discussion, and it's so I wanted to start with reminding you that, believe it or not, we're more than half through the current biennium. I don't know about you. I don't know where the time went. It's just like, serious. It's already August, and we're already talking about the next biennium. We're already talking about budget, and oh my goodness. Anyway, yes, believe it or not, it's time to talk about it. So, for those of you who are new to this committee and to this work, JCP planning is a process that every county and every tribe has to go through in order to receive JCP funds for the upcoming biennium. And for this current one, we asked counties and tribes to submit one or two on the other thing. One thing was if they are making no changes to their last biennial plan, then they would fill out a form that was called updated plan, meaning it's pretty much stays the same, minor things may have changed. Well, it's not minor, arguably, the allocation could have changed.
Yeah.
Right? And but the basic thing remains the same. The program that had been selected for the previous biennium was working fine, and there are no significant demographic changes, so the people chose to remain, keep funding the same thing, but they still have to explain to us why. Why is it still working? Are your outcomes supporting your claim that it's still working in your community, and so forth? So that's an updated plan. It's fairly simple. You just continue to do what you've been doing, with caveat that you need to explain to us why do you think it is, and prove it with your data. So that's one option. And the second one was to ask people to submit an updated plan. I'm sorry, how did we call it? No, my goodness, I forgot. What did just Multnomah County apply for? No, that's not it.
An amendment?
Which one?
The amendment?
No, it was something else. It was an updated plan and then the new one revised or something. Well, anyway. Amended, I remember now. So the amended plan meant that we want to make some changes in the upcoming biennium because the programs or services that we're funding currently are no longer either relevant or not producing enough results. Well, kind of like what Multnomah County is doing, but in the middle of a biennium. Was that if a county or tribe want to make like overall change to the funding application, they would need to present us with an amended plan, which will require them going through a little more involvement with the community stakeholders, and it's a more extensive and time-consuming process. So that's what we did for this current biennium. So my question to you is, do we want to continue with this pattern? Because or we can do it differently, which is a lot more time-consuming. We'll assume that everybody will be amending their plan or sending a completely new one, with the requirement that everybody goes through an extensive community planning process. which had always also been done in the past, but not every biennium because it does feel a little too much of a burden on communities, especially if they don't intend to make any big changes. And the reason it's important to have this conversation now, because if we decide to go with the amended and updated plan option, we need to make this determination and have this decided by the YDC in September. Or if we're going through a comprehensive planning process, we'll also need to decide it in September, because we'll have to come up with the guidelines for the next biennial planning this fall. Because we need to allow people some time to prepare the plans, to assess their data, to assess their funding options, and so forth. So with that, I will just open it up for you. What's your comfort zone? How do you envision the planning? A couple of biennia ago, we had a huge, I shouldn't say huge, but there was a shift in Jcp planning guidelines when positive use development approach became a required component of the plan, and then it was dropped during the last biennial. So how do you see it? Go and actually now that I think about it, not all of you were involved in the previous cycle, so maybe a little more discussion is needed about what an updated plan expectations are and whether amended plan expectations are, but I would like to get this communication, at least the conversation, started earlier rather than later in the pre-planning process, so it's kind of food for thought right now.
Anya, I wasn't on this group when the last go round with the update versus amended plan. I just know about it from the lens of being, being the lead agency that made sure that we got our updated plan turned in. So I'm curious, that was a change in how you had previously done it? So was there feedback? What did you hear from the various counties and tribes around that change? Or did you?
I think so. We don't. The feedback we received for the last set of guidelines was that they were fairly easy to follow. They were not overly complicated, and we asked people to be as succinct as possible in their responses. We didn't ask to write essays. We just needed them to basically show us your data, tell us what it is that you intend to do, and tell us how and how much money you're going to invest in it. So it was pretty straightforward. And yes, of course, we did not remove the evidence-based requirement from the funding, since that's a state statute and that has to be fulfilled.
Right.
But overall, I think it was much easier on people just to go through an update. I don't know if amended plan was any easier than usual, because they would still have to go through this comprehensive community kind of planning process. But I don't know, Molly was part of both planning options. So Molly, do you want to talk about it both from the committee and the implementers perspective?
So I think last time from the committee perspective, they were super easy to review because we asked the questions we wanted to ask, and we asked for it to, brevity was at the top of the game. And so it gave us a lot of great information from that perspective. Is anybody else on, is Judge Abernathy still on the phone? She participated and was really involved in the conversations when we reviewed them last time as well. So,
Yes, I'm still on the phone. I just couldn't find my mute button for a minute.
oh, great. Well, your perspective, Kathy.
Oh, I just wanted to say I think the streamlining worked, and I thought that that was very valuable. We got what we needed without a lot of burden to the applicants.
I appreciate it. I agree. I think we spent the time to ask the right questions that we wanted.
Well, I'm just thinking out loud about all of the uncertainties coming up during this time period. The legislature will be in session. Looks like an extraordinarily tough budget process. I think we usually had to turn these in, wasn't it usually by around the end of March? Is that correct?
Yeah, right, by the end of March, but we shouldn't be issuing guidelines any later than December. So that's why I'm trying to kind of put us on a timeline here. So this is not a conversation to be had in September at the YDC meeting. It's a little early for that. But since this committee meets only once in 3 months as well, I don't want to wait until November to put it in on your radar, because between now and November, we should have the guidelines ready to go. So the guidelines should be ready for approval by the YDC at the December meeting, and then they should be released for folks. So between now and December, we should have hopefully a better sense of both the budget, at least some hint of what the budget might look like. Are we cutting in half, or are we staying? Well, I mean, I hate guessing. I really do. I never guess right. If I did, I would be rich, but I'm not.
Oh, I think Christina, you bring up a good point. In how we write it, we need to be able to allow counties and allow YDD to engage in a conversation of flexibility about the bottom line. So the service, because of the budget uncertainty, and so kind of thinking through, is there a way to write it that has some of those uncertainties built into the process? And like you, thinking out loud, but really asking for what their intended plan would be, and maybe inserting a couple of questions in there if there's less reduction, or if there's, I don't know. Let's think that that's what we'll be asking, really, for you to help us, because you have lots of these as well, help the committee think about how to write it so it's meaningful. And so if there is a reduction, counties don't have to rewrite their plans. So as we think through what that might look like, that's a really good point.
Right, I guess I would just advocate, we live in a constant state of uncertainty normally, but we're in a state of uncertainty on steroids with all of the many forces at play in our world right now. So I don't know, I guess maybe I'm advocating for the streamlined approach. If counties are going into this thinking we're going to keep doing what we did, then they put together the data and the updated questions, but it isn't a whole redo. I think that might be the way to go. That's just my opinion. I understand it's really important how we use this funding.
Molly, do you want to ask Brian? Brian, are you still there? Let's ask the consumer.
Yes, I'm still here. Yeah, I would, in my county, I can tell you, meeting and getting some of those people to collaborate and with bottom lines and what different budgets and commitments. I'm not going to say it would be impossible, because there's nothing that's impossible, but it would be, it could be challenging. My preference would be to streamline it and continue to move forward unless your plan is changing significantly. And then candidly, in the conversations that are happening in my county right now, if we wanted to significantly change our plan, I would need to submit that anyway, while recognizing that's what the need is, or that's where we need to reinvest those dollars to get a better return. That's what my partners should be telling me if that's what they think when I'm making this pitch to them on the front end. So That's my thought.
Thank you, Brian. So what I'm thinking is this: would it be possible to gather either the same set of bright heads who will be helping with the system improvement work, or another group of bright heads to help with the development of the draft of the new guidelines? So this group can take a look at a draft guideline version at the November meeting, with the expectation then whatever final draft can go to the YDC for approval in December, and then the guidelines will be released to the communities.
Yeah.
And you don't have to volunteer right now. I don't want to put people on the spot, especially those who are not in this call today, because the likelihood of us volunteering them is high, but we probably couldn't do that to our colleagues.
So Anya, I think it would be great to do 2 different calls, just so that there's not any crunch in time in between the different conversations. And then also, as people get interested, I think there were 9 questions last time, 8 or 9 questions that we had to answer. Getting those back out to the committee members ahead of time so that we're looking at those guidelines.
Yes.
Okay. That'd be great.
Okay. So you'll expect a communication coming from me after this meeting, probably not this afternoon, but soon enough, with 3 kind of separate pockets of information. One will be around the training opportunities in October and November, actually, and then August too, for the younger folks, if you have anybody in your community who might be interested. The second wall will be asking for volunteers to work on system improvement funding possibilities, and the third one asking for a work group to help with the Jcp planning guidelines for the next biennium. Does that seem fair enough?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. You've been most helpful.
I really appreciate everybody giving us our time today. And if there are not, we have less than a minute to go. Anybody has a burning thing they want to say?
Molly, I just wanted to let you know, Sandy just sent an email to let you know that you will be on the agenda for the September meeting to give an update on the committee work. So
Okay.
Just passing that message along.
Thank you. Thanks, Anji.
You're welcome.
I think we're done. Thank you, everybody. And I really appreciate all staff making it happen today. Lindsay, thank you. Welcome aboard. We haven't got to meet in person yet, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Stay well, everybody.
Be
Thank
well,
you.
yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Likewise, you all as well.
Bye. Thank you.